Welcome to Ryan's Running Reviews in partnership with Roadrunner Sports, and today we're taking a look at the Ride 16 from Saucony and also comparing it to last year's Ride 15 to see what changed. Let's run with it. Now, before we get started, I do want to say these shoes were provided to me by Roadrunner Sports. However, no one had a chance to preview this video, and this file synopsis is my own. I'd also like to say, please leave a like on the video and consider subscribing. Here we go. The Ride series is their flagship neutral daily trainer, kind of their go-to option that is designed to handle a wide variety of runs. And I'll also say if you're someone who wants a bit more stability out of their daily trainer but doesn't want to go to something like the Guide, which is a stability shoe, I think the Ride works quite well, as I do consider it a very stable neutral daily training option. The Ride 15 and the Ride 16 are basically identical on paper. They both cost $140, although you'll be able to find the 15 on sale now that the 16 is out. They both only weigh 8.8 ounces, making it a lighter daily training option, and they both have the same 8mm heel to toe drop with the same stack height, 35 millimeters in the heel and 27 in the forefoot. These shoes are very close to each other with some very minor differences that we'll talk about here. To the best of my knowledge and research, it appears that Saucony only made a few small tweaks to the upper and left everything else essentially the same. The upper is still an engineered mesh material. However, last year we had two layers of it. Essentially, you had the internal liner of engineered mesh, which connected to the tongue as the tongue was fully gusseted, and then you had that outer layer of engineered mesh, which you can see here. That has been changed this year, where it's now just one continuous thin layer of engineered mesh with about the same kind of breathability. And I will say, I think they pulled it a little bit more tightly across the forefoot compared to last year. It feels roughly the same. I think you maybe have just a smidge more volume to the forefoot on the 15 compared to the 16. And the other thing is the tongue is no longer fully gusseted because there is no longer that internal engineered mesh liner to the shoe. You have two pieces of somewhat elastic material, one on the lateral side and one on the medial side, that keeps the tongue in place. And speaking of the tongue, they did change the shape of it this year. It's a more rectangular-like geometry. It makes it wider at the top and makes it feel a bit bulkier, although the level of cushioning and padding is exactly the same or roughly comparable as last year. It's pretty hard to tell the difference. Now, this comes to your personal preference. For me, I kind of like the shape and geometry of last year, as it's not as wide at the top compared to the 16. And I think the 15 has a more seamless, consistent feel as it connects into the internal engineered mesh liner, which the 16 does not have, as it just has two pieces of material keeping the tongue in place. Very minor gripes, in my opinion. It really comes down to, again, your personal preference. I don't think it really moves the needle one way or the other, but it is a change I think I should note. Saucony also updated the lacing system. You had these small ribbon-like cables, one on the lateral side, one on the medial side. It's the gray piece of fabric here. Essentially, you have these two pieces of material. One runs through the midfoot, one kind of pulls towards the back part of the shoe. Saw the same thing on the 15, except it's a red cable. It's a little bit larger and a little bit thicker. Personally, I don't think it really helped, or I didn't really notice it. However, if you look at a lot of Saucony shoes, like the Triumph, the Tempest, the Guide, and here on the Ride, they use a similar structure of support. So for whatever reason, some Saucony engineer somewhere thinks this is an optimal way to lace your shoes. And for me, I didn't really notice it, didn't feel like it helped me, didn't feel like it hurt me. I think they made them slightly thinner here on the 16 because they were somewhat noticeable when you first put your foot into the shoe and first lace things up. You can kind of notice the red ribbon cable, but once you got running, that sensation kind of melted away and you kind of hardly noticed it at all. And I think that's why they did it here on the 16 when people are trying out shoes. I don't think they want to give them anything that's different or too startling, but they still believe in this type of lace structure. In my opinion, didn't really notice it, didn't really bother me, and I think that the lockdown was quite superb here, and I don't know, it's just something to note, and it's quite interesting to see. I would love to talk to someone from Saucony and why exactly they use these little cables, but at the end of the day, for me, didn't bother me. It's less noticeable compared to the 15, so if you didn't like them on the 15, they're less noticeable, if hardly at all, here on the 16 with a great lockdown, very similar to last year. Moving to the back of the shoe, the 16 appears to have just a tiny bit more padding in the ankle and Achilles area, and a slightly wider opening to the shoe itself. The heel counter is quite sturdy, just like last year, and I really was happy again with the lockdown and fit. Just like last year, I really like the 15, and the 16 feels very, very comparable. The only minor difference towards the back is it might be a little bit easier to slip your foot into the 16 compared to the 15, but otherwise, again, they feel very similar with regard to lockdown and fit. Moving on to the midsole, it's the same thing as last year, so we can take the 15, move it off to the side, and focus solely on the 16 because really nothing changed here. Now, if we pull out the insert, we still have a surprise, PWRRUN Plus, which is one of Saucony's midsole foams like we see on the Triumph. Now, PWRRUN Plus is a polyurethane or PU material. It's a little bit bouncier, a little bit more dense compared to PWRRUN, which is an EVA foam with some other materials blended in. So you get a nice dual density setup. I think it does a good job of giving you a nice level of added shock absorption. It's not, again, super noticeable. It's not like a massive squishy insert, but I think it does a good job giving you some initial comfort and helps, again, dampen some of that shock while you're running. And like I just mentioned, we have a full-length PWRRUN foam midsole, which is the EVA blended type material. This does run to the firmer side of things. It's not the most energetic or bouncy midsole compound out there. If you do want something like that, go with like the Triumph, which has PWRRUN Plus, or the Speed 3, which has PWRRUN PB, an extremely light, fun P-backspace material. Gives you a ton of energy return. However, here on the ride, this gives you, like I said, a rather firm experience, but has a nice level of shock absorption and impact protection. It's also quite stable because, yes, you have a solid base to run on, but also there is some contouring with the midsole, which means your foot sits a little bit lower within the foam, giving you kind of walls of foam on the lateral and medial side, keeping your foot from kind of doing anything too funky. And you have a very large base to land on, a ton of surface area on the forefoot and heel area, giving you a very stable, neutral daily trainer. The Ride 16 is very flexible in the forefoot and helps you notice that moderate rocker geometry, which flows you along nicely. It's a very smooth shoe, and I think it's quite versatile as well. The one thing I didn't necessarily love it for was recovery day or slower efforts, just because you didn't have a lot of soft cushion for the push-in, as they say. Moving on to the outsole, we have the same exact pattern as the 15. It's rather smooth, low pattern. I think it works better on those more conventional surfaces like concrete and asphalt. Didn't have any major issues with it. We saw a big change from the 14 to the 15, which is why the 15 lost so much weight. So the lugs got a little bit more shallow, a little bit more smooth for profile, but I think it works quite well, and I didn't have any major issues. So at the end of the day, the Ride 16 feels very familiar, as it is almost identical to the Ride 15. The only thing that separates them is a couple small tweaks to the upper itself. Yes, the tongue's a little bit bulkier and wider at the top, and we do have now just a single layer of engineered mesh through the upper compared to that internal layer of engineered mesh we saw on the 15. We also have smaller ribbon cables, a little bit thicker on the 15 compared to the 16, as they've been pared back just a bit. And the tongue is no longer fully gusseted. You basically just have two pieces of material, one on the lateral and one on the medial side, to keep it in place. Otherwise, I'm actually kind of surprised Saucony didn't decide to change it up too much. They just made some small adjustments, and honestly, they may have just kind of looked out the community and said, hey, people really like the Ride 15. I was a fan. I love the upper. I love the fit, and I think it works as a versatile daily trainer. It's not the bounciest or squishiest option, but I think it's a solid, stable, neutral daily trainer if you want to have that in your arsenal. So kind of looked at that. They had success last year, and they said, let's just make us some small tweaks here, and that's what they did with the 16. So they are very similar, same kind of midsole, same ride with the ride, and yeah, it just kind of comes down to what kind of tongue you want, or just what kind of, I guess, ribbon cable experience you want. But otherwise, they are very, very similar. So let me know down in the comments what you think of the Ride 16. Are you happy with the updates? Did you want them to change more, or are you going to kind of stick with the Ride 15? I'd love to hear from you. Well, I'm Ryan from Ryan's Running Reviews, and I'll catch you guys on the next one. Thanks.